My name is Daniel, and I used to believe that I had a perfect life. I had a stable job as a project manager at a reputable firm, a modest but comfortable home, and a loving wife named Sarah. We married 5 years ago, and during those years, we built a life together that many would envy. We often talked about starting a family, buying a bigger house, and traveling the world. However, as I look back now, I see that the cracks in our relationship were there all along, hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. Sarah was the kind of woman who lit up a room with her smile. She was ambitious and driven, and I admired her for that. I often joked that she could charm the stars from the sky. But as our lives progressed, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. It started with the long hours at work. I remember her coming home late, often with an excuse about deadlines and meetings. I'd brush it off, convincing myself that it was just a phase, that she was dedicated to her career. After all, I had my own projects and deadlines to contend with, so I felt a sense of solidarity in our shared busyness. Then there were the little things, the way she grew distracted during dinner conversations, her phone buzzing incessantly with messages she wouldn't share. I told myself it was work-related. I wanted to trust her, to believe in our marriage. But as the months passed, I felt an unfamiliar distance growing between us, like a chasm I couldn't quite bridge. I tried to reach out to connect with her, but she seemed preoccupied, lost in thoughts I couldn't penetrate. My efforts felt like throwing pebbles into a well, hopping to hear a splash, but only ever met with silence. The signs were there if I had been willing to see them. Her laughter became less frequent, her affection more reserved. I convinced myself that it was the stress of work, that we were both just caught up in the grind of adult life. I longed for the days when we'd spend weekends exploring new places or just cuddling on the couch watching movies. But those moments grew scarce, and I became increasingly isolated in my own home. Then, one fateful Thursday evening, everything changed. I came home early, hoping to surprise Sarah with dinner. I wanted to rekindle that connection we once had. As I entered our house, I noticed it was eerily quiet. The lights were dimmed and there was an unusual scent in the air, a mixture of perfume and something else that sent a chill down my spine. I called out for her, but there was no answer. I walked down the hallway, my heart racing with an inexplicable dread. As I approached our bedroom, I heard muffled voices. I paused outside the door, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe she was on a call, or perhaps she was chatting with a friend. But as I pressed my ear against the door, I realized the voices were too intimate, too close. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. With a deep breath, I opened the door. What I saw will forever be etched in my memory. Sarah was in bed with Mark, my colleague. The shock hit me like a freight train. I felt the air leave my lungs, my heart pounding in my chest. They were locked in a moment that was supposed to be ours, a moment that I had been fighting for in the quiet hours of our marriage. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met mine. Fear, guilt, and a flicker of surprise flashed across their faces. I stood there paralyzed as the reality of the situation sank in. Betrayal surged through me like a tidal wave, drowning out every rational thought. My wife, my partner, the woman I loved, had chosen him over me. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I had been so blind, so naive to think that everything was fine. The life I had built, the dreams we shared, all of it crumbled in an instant. I backed away, my heart racing, my mind racing even faster, and I stumbled out of the house, feeling as though I were losing my grip on reality. As I stood outside in the cool evening air, I felt an unsettling calm wash over me. I had to think clearly. I had to figure out what to do next. The betrayal was fresh, raw, and painful, but in that moment, a single thought emerged from the chaos. I would not let them get away with this. The next few days were a blur. I moved through life like a ghost, my body present but my mind elsewhere. I went to work, sat through meetings, and nodded along to conversations, but inside I was raging. The betrayal replayed in my mind like a broken record. I felt like a puppet with its strings cut, aimlessly wandering through the motions of my day-to-day life. I found myself obsessively scrolling through social media, looking for any sign of Sarah and Mark together. I knew it was unhealthy, but I couldn't help it. My heart raced with every notification, every picture, every comment. I remember one afternoon, sitting in my car during my lunch break, scrolling through their profiles. There it was, an innocuous picture of Sarah at a company event, laughing with colleagues, Mark's hand resting casually on her shoulder. It felt like a knife had plunged into my chest. I could almost hear their laughter echoing in my mind, mocking my pain. I tried to talk to Sarah during those days, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. The hurt and betrayal were too raw, too visceral. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I also feared the confrontation. What if she justified her actions? What if she didn't feel remorse? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I found myself retreating further into my shell. Then one evening I decided to confront her. I had spent the day stewing in my thoughts, crafting the perfect words in my mind. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, ready to boil over. I wanted her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me. I needed her to understand the gravity of her betrayal. When Sarah came home that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. The atmosphere was thick with tension. She walked in, her eyes immediately searching for my face, and I could see the flicker of apprehension in them. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sit down," I said, my tone cold and steady. "What's going on?" she asked, taking a cautious step toward me. "Just sit down," I repeated, my heart racing. I watched her as she lowered herself onto the couch, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Daniel, you're scaring me," she said, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I know about you and Mark." Her reaction was instant, her face blanched and her eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, but the guilt was written all over her face. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I saw you both together." My voice cracked and the weight of my words hung heavy in the air between us. For a moment she sat in stunned silence, her mind racing as she searched for the right words. "Daniel, please." "It's not what you think," she finally managed, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. "Not what I think," I scoffed, my anger boiling over. "You're in bed with my colleague. How is that not what I think?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. A mistake." I interrupted, my voice rising. "You think that sleeping with someone else is just a mistake? You think that's something you can just brush off?" The conversation spiraled into a heated exchange, accusations flying like arrows. Sarah tried to justify her actions, claiming that we had grown apart, that she felt neglected. I felt my heart shatter further with each word she spoke. I had been so focused on work, so wrapped up in my own life, that I hadn't seen the signs, but her explanation felt hollow, like a feeble excuse for her betrayal. "Daniel, I love you," she pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Love," I echoed, my heart aching. "How could you love me and do this? How could you betray our vows so easily?" The confrontation reached a boiling point, and I felt the weight of the betrayal crash down on me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her feel the pain she had caused me. But deep down, I also felt a flicker of something else, an understanding that our marriage was shattered beyond repair. As she sobbed before me, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in my own heartbreak or take control of the situation. I had been wronged, and I was not going to let them get away with it. The thought of revenge began to creep into my mind, a dark whisper that promised satisfaction for the pain I felt. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not just confront Sarah, I would make sure that Mark paid for his betrayal as well. I would ensure that they both faced the consequences of their actions. The anger that had consumed me began to morph into a cold determination. I would take my power back. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady and resolute, "this isn't over." The confrontation with Sarah left me feeling drained, yet a fire ignited within me. I was no longer the passive husband who overlooked the signs of infidelity. I was now a man wronged and determined to seek retribution. As I lay awake that night, the darkness of my thoughts enveloped me, and I began to formulate a plan. Revenge was not just a fleeting thought, it was a necessity. Mark had invaded my life, my marriage, and I would not let him walk away unscathed. The next day at work, I found myself observing Mark more closely than ever. He was oblivious to the turmoil he had caused, laughing and joking with colleagues, his usual confident demeanor intact. I felt a surge of anger at how easily he carried on as if nothing had changed. I wanted to confront him, to tell him that I knew about the affair, but that would have been too easy. I needed something more tangible, something that would shake him to his core. I spent my lunch break strategizing. I knew that Mark was well regarded in our company, a rising star with promising potential. But I also knew he had vulnerabilities, flaws that could be exploited. He had a reputation for bending the rules, a willingness to cut corners to get ahead. It was time to gather evidence to document his misdeeds. I began to pay attention to his work habits, noting the late nights he spent in the office and the questionable decisions he made on projects. My plan took shape slowly. I was meticulous, documenting everything I could find. I started to gather emails, messages, and reports that showcased not only his incompetence but also his ethical lapses. I would build a case against him, one that would be hard for anyone to dismiss. It was strategic and cold, but I felt empowered. Each piece of evidence I collected was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. As I delved deeper into this plan, I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions. Part of me felt exhilarated by the prospect of revenge, while another part of me questioned whether I was becoming the very monster I despised. Was I really willing to destroy someone's career over a personal betrayal? But every time I thought of Sarah and Mark together, the pain surged back, and my resolve hardened. I justified my actions by telling myself that they deserved to face the consequences of their choices. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I decided to confront Sarah again. I needed to gauge her feelings, to understand how she viewed our relationship now. I wanted to see if there was any remorse left in her or if she had already moved on. I returned home, my heart racing as I prepared for the conversation. "Sarah," I said as I entered the living room where she sat curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She looked up at me with weary eyes, and I could see the remnants of our previous confrontation still etched on her face. "Daniel, she started, but I held up my hand to stop her. "I need you to listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to know if you feel any regret about what happened. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Her expression shifted, and I could see the struggle in her eyes. "I do, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I never wanted to hurt you, but I felt so lost. I thought I could find something in Mark that I was missing with you." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. "You thought cheating would solve your problems. Did you ever consider how it would affect me, our marriage?" "I know, and I hate myself for it," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know how to fix this. I love you, Daniel, but I don't know if we can go back." Her words twisted in my gut. Love. It felt like a hollow term now, a word that had lost its meaning. I realized in that moment that I had to let go of the idea of reconciliation. There was no going back from this betrayal. I would not be the man who forgave and forgot. I would be the man who took action. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice firm. "I need time to think." As I turned to leave the room, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. I was no longer just a husband scorned. I was a man on a mission. The pieces of my plan were falling into place, and I was ready to execute it. I would ensure that both Sarah and Mark faced the consequences of their actions, and I would do it without hesitation. The following week, I continued to gather information on Mark. I reached out to a few trusted colleagues, discreetly asking about his work ethic and experiences with him. I learned that he had a reputation for being charming, but also for taking credit for others' work. It was all the ammunition I needed. Then came the day I decided to act. I compiled everything I had collected into a comprehensive report, detailing Mark's unethical behavior and the ways he had violated company policies. I made sure to include timestamps, emails, and even eyewitness accounts from colleagues who had witnessed his actions. I was meticulous, ensuring that there would be no way for anyone to dismiss my claims. With the report in hand, I walked into the HR office, my heart racing but my resolve unwavering. This was it. I was ready to set the wheels in motion. Entering the HR office felt like stepping into a lion's den. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions that swirled within me. I had spent days preparing for this moment, and now, standing before the HR manager, I felt a mix of adrenaline and trepidation. This was my chance to take control and ensure that Mark faced the consequences of his actions. "Daniel, what can I do for you today?" Linda, the HR manager, asked with a friendly smile, her demeanor warm and inviting. I forced a smile in return, but my heart raced. "I need to discuss some serious concerns regarding Mark Thompson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression shifted slightly, and I could see the curiosity in her eyes. "Of course. What seems to be the problem?" I pulled out the meticulously prepared report, my hands trembling slightly as I laid it on her desk. "I've gathered evidence regarding Mark's conduct at work. I believe he's been engaging in unethical behavior that could potentially harm the company." Linda's eyebrows furrowed as she picked up the report and began to skim through it. I watched her expression change from curiosity to concern as she read the details I had compiled. "This is quite serious," she said, looking back up at me. "Are you sure about this?" "I am," I replied, my voice firm. "I have documented instances of him taking credit for others' work, manipulating deadlines, and even circumventing company policy to gain an advantage. This isn't just a personal vendetta, it's about the integrity of our workplace." She continued to read, her brow furrowing deeper as she absorbed the information. "And how did you come by this information?" she asked, glancing back at me. "I've been observing his work habits for some time now," I explained. "I've spoken to colleagues who have witnessed his behavior, and I've compiled emails and other correspondence that demonstrate his unethical practices." Linda set the report down and looked at me intently. "This is a serious accusation, Daniel. If we move forward with this, it will require a thorough investigation. Are you prepared for the potential fallout?" I nodded, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "I am. I can't stand by and let him get away with this, especially after what he did to my marriage. He needs to face consequences for his actions." Linda took a moment, considering my words. "I'll need to discuss this with the higher-ups, but I assure you that we take these matters seriously. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." As I left the HR office, a sense of relief washed over me. I had taken the first step toward making Mark pay for his betrayal. I felt a surge of power, a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't felt since the affair was discovered. This was my way of reclaiming control over my life, my marriage, and my dignity. Over the next few days, I watched as the investigation unfolded. I had provided Linda with enough evidence to warrant a formal inquiry, and I could see the effects ripple through the office. Mark's usual swagger began to fade as whispers circulated about his questionable practices. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction each time I saw him. The once confident man was now visibly anxious, glancing over his shoulder as if he sensed the impending storm. I also continued to interact with Sarah, albeit with a growing detachment. It was as if I were living two separate lives, one at work, where I was a man on a mission, and another at home, where I was still grappling with the emotional fallout of her betrayal. Our conversations had become strained, and I could feel the distance between us widening. One evening, Sarah approached me as I sat in the living room, reviewing documents related to the investigation. "Daniel, can we talk?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I looked up, meeting her gaze. "About what?" "About how you cheated on me, or about how I'm trying to make sure Mark pays for it. Please, I know I've messed up, but I want us to work through this," she said, desperation lacing her tone. I felt a surge of anger at her words. "Work through this? How can we work through anything when you've shattered my trust? You've destroyed everything we built together." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "I was confused and I made a mistake, but I love you, Daniel. I want to fix this." Her words felt like a hollow echo of what I once wanted to believe. "Love isn't enough, Sarah. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I'm sorry, but I can't just forget this." I watched as her expression shifted from pleading to despair. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm doing what I need to do," I replied, my voice steady. "You made your choice and now I'm making mine. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. As I turned away from her, I felt a pang of guilt. I had wanted to salvage our marriage, to believe that we could recover from this. But the truth was that I was too consumed by my desire for revenge to consider reconciliation. My focus had shifted entirely to Mark, and I was determined to see my plan through to the end. Days turned into weeks and the investigation continued to unfold. I watched as Mark became increasingly paranoid, his confidence eroding with each passing day. I could see the toll it was taking on him, and while part of me felt a sense of satisfaction, another part of me questioned whether I was going too far. But then, on a Friday afternoon, everything came to a head. I received an email from Linda, requesting me to come to her office for an urgent meeting. My heart raced as I made my way to HR, a mix of anticipation and anxiety coursing through me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. When I arrived, I found Linda sitting at her desk, her expression serious. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We've conducted a thorough investigation into the claims you made regarding Mark." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Based on the evidence you provided, we've concluded that Mark has indeed violated several company policies," she said, looking straight into my eyes. "As a result, we will be terminating his employment effective immediately." A rush of satisfaction surged through me, but it was quickly eclipsed by a sense of dread. I had achieved what I set out to do, but at what cost? The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment I felt a rush of triumph. Mark would no longer be part of our workplace. He would face the consequences of his actions. But as I sat in Linda's office, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in my gut. I had orchestrated this downfall, but at what cost to my own soul? "Thank you for your diligence in bringing this to our attention," Linda continued, her voice steady. "We take workplace integrity very seriously, and your courage in coming forward speaks volumes about your character." I nodded, but the praise felt hollow. I had acted out of pain and anger, not virtue. I had become a man driven by revenge, and now that I had achieved my goal, I was left to grapple with the aftermath of my actions. "Will he be formally notified today?" I asked, trying to maintain a facade of professionalism. "Yes, we'll be handling that this afternoon. I'll ensure he receives the news privately," she assured me. "You won't need to be involved in that process." As I left her office, I felt an unsettling mix of emotions: satisfaction, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I had won this battle, but the war within me raged on. I couldn't help but think about how my actions would affect Mark's life. He would lose his job, his reputation, perhaps even his livelihood. Was that justice, or was it simply cruelty? The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the image of Mark's face when he received the news. Would he be angry, devastated? Would he blame me for his downfall? I had no way of knowing, but the thought of it gnawed at me. When I returned home that evening, Sarah was waiting for me, her eyes searching my face for answers. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice tense. "It's done," I replied flatly, avoiding her gaze. "Done? What do you mean?" she pressed, her expression shifting to one of concern. "I mean Mark is no longer with the company," I said, my tone colder than I intended. Her expression fell, and I could see the realization dawning on her. "You actually went through with it," she whispered, a mix of awe and fear in her voice. "Yes, I did," I replied, my heart pounding. "He needed to face the consequences of his actions." "I can't believe you did this," she said, her voice trembling. "What if it ruins him?" "Maybe he deserves it," I snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. "He ruined my life, Sarah. He took everything from me." "But Daniel, this isn't just about you. This is a man's life we're talking about," she argued, her eyes pleading. "Spare me the lecture," I shot back, my anger flaring. "You're the one who chose to betray me. You're the one who put me in this position." Tension hung thick in the air as we faced each other, both of us raw and vulnerable. "I know I messed up," she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. "But this isn't the answer. You can't just destroy someone because they hurt you. Watch me," I replied, my voice low and dangerous. I turned away, not wanting to engage in another fruitless argument. I needed to process everything that had happened, but the weight of my actions felt suffocating. I had crossed a line, and I was beginning to realize that revenge didn't come without its own set of consequences. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of Mark. I imagined his reaction when he learned he had been fired. Would he lash out? Would he confront me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I found it hard to sleep. In the days that followed, I kept an eye on my email and social media, bracing myself for any backlash from Mark. I anticipated messages, threats, or even a confrontation at work. But the silence was deafening. I had expected him to fight back, to defend himself, but instead, he seemed to disappear from my life as suddenly as he had entered it. Then one evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post that made my stomach drop. It was a picture of Mark, standing in front of a "Now Hearing" sign. At a local diner, the caption read, "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, ready to start fresh." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over me. I had succeeded in destroying his career, but at what cost? A sense of guilt washed over me, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had gone too far. I had wanted to make him pay, but now I realized that I had not only hurt him, I had hurt myself in the process. The next day I found myself in a meeting with Linda and other colleagues. The atmosphere felt different, charged with a tension that hadn't existed before. Whispers circulated about Mark's firing, and I could feel the weight of judgment in the air. I was the one who had brought this upon him, and now I was left to face the consequences of my actions. After the meeting, I approached Linda in her office. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "Of course, Daniel. What's on your mind?" She replied, looking up from her notes. "I wanted to ask if there's any way to help Mark," I said, my heart racing. "Is there anything we can do for him? I know he made mistakes, but I don't want to see him suffer." Linda looked at me, surprise flickering in her eyes. "That's very generous of you, Daniel. It's important to remember that while we must hold people accountable for their actions, compassion should also be part of the equation." I didn't think it would go this far," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression softening. "It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment. It's never too late to show empathy. If you want to reach out to him, I could help facilitate that." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "I think I'd like that," I said, my voice steadier. As I left her office, I felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge. I had been consumed by revenge, but perhaps there was still a chance for redemption for both Mark and myself. I could extend an olive branch, a way to acknowledge the pain we had all caused each other. The next day, I reached out to Mark. I sent him a message, expressing my regret about how things had unfolded and offering to help him find new opportunities. It was a small step, but it felt significant. I was no longer just a man seeking revenge. I was a man trying to make amends. As I awaited his response, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of healing, not just for Mark, but for myself as well. The days that followed my message to Mark were some of the most nerve-wracking of my life. I kept my phone close, anxiously checking for a response. My heart raced each time I heard a notification, only to feel a pang of disappointment when it turned out to be nothing. I had extended an olive branch, but I wondered if he would even want to accept it after everything that had happened. Finally, 3 days later, I received a reply. The message was short but powerful. "I appreciate you reaching out, Daniel. It's been a tough time, but I'm working through it. Let's talk." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had expected anger or resentment, but instead, Mark seemed willing to engage. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the office, and as the day approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. This was a chance for both of us to address the pain we had caused each other. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I spotted Mark sitting at a corner table, his demeanor subdued. He looked different, more rugged, perhaps a little worn down by the recent events. I approached him and he looked up, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Hey," I said, offering a tentative smile as I took a seat across from him. "Hey," he replied, his tone neutral. There was a tension in the air, a palpable weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "I wanted to talk to you about everything that happened," I began, my heart racing. "I know I played a part in how things unfolded, and I genuinely regret how it all went down." Mark nodded, his expression unreadable. "It's been a rough few weeks, Daniel. Losing my job was a shock, but I can't say I didn't see it coming. I crossed lines I shouldn't have. I understand, I said, my voice steady, but I want you to know that I didn't take pleasure in seeing you lose everything. I was hurt and I let that dictate my actions. I realize now that it was a mistake. Mark looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I get it. I messed up too. I thought I was filling a void, but it only led to more pain. I never wanted to hurt you. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. In that moment, I saw a man who had made a grave mistake but was also willing to acknowledge it. The anger I had felt toward him began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of understanding. I want to help you get back on your feet, I said, my voice firm. If there's anything I can do, connections, references, just let me know. I don't want to see you suffer for what happened. Mark looked down at his coffee, contemplating my offer. I appreciate that, Daniel. It means a lot. I know I have to take responsibility for my actions, but I also want to move forward. I want to make things right. We spent the next hour talking, sharing stories about our careers, our mistakes, and our aspirations. It was an unexpected conversation, one that transformed our animosity into a shared understanding of our flawed humanity. By the end of our meeting, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had confronted my pain and extended a hand to the man who had once been my rival. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter. I had taken a step toward healing, not just for Mark, but for myself. The weight of revenge had lifted, replaced by the realization that sometimes the best way to reclaim your power is to show compassion. When I returned home, Sarah was waiting for me, her eyes filled with curiosity. "How did it go?" she asked, her tone cautious. "It went well," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "We talked. I offered to help him find a new job." "Really?" she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't think you would do that." I shrugged, unsure of how to articulate the shift I had experienced. I realized that holding onto anger wasn't helping anyone. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we just need a chance to things right. Sarah studied me for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Do you think this means you're ready to forgive me?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm working on understanding what happened. I need time." She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "That's fair. I'll give you space. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything." As I settled into bed that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had taken steps toward healing and reconciliation, not just with Mark but also within myself. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. I would no longer be defined by betrayal. I would define myself by how I chose to respond to it. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding my own life. I took time for self-reflection, exploring my passions and reconnecting with friends. I even started to think about what I wanted for my future. As I worked through my feelings, I realized that while the scars of betrayal would remain, they could also serve as a testament to my resilience. Life moved on, and so did I. Mark eventually found a new job, and we maintained a cordial relationship, built on mutual respect and understanding. Sarah and I continued to navigate our own path, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to try. In the end, I learned that revenge may feel satisfying in the moment, but compassion and forgiveness hold far more power. I had a choice: to be a man defined by anger or a man defined by understanding. I chose the latter, and in doing so, I found a sense of freedom I never thought possible. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a quiet strength within me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my own destiny. And with that realization, I finally closed my eyes, ready to move forward into the unknown.